I want to kind of dig deeper into this on how you might start some kind of cooperative education thing like this. So the difference of just streaming, just kind of watching videos. I think that there's a lot you can get from like TED Talks, TED Ed. I don't know if you're familiar with TED Ed that much.
Yep.
There's a lot of great things there, and I think that should be probably a good chunk of the bulk of the education system is personalized. But I think everybody needs to have at least a couple hours a week that's like this. It's interactive. That's one-on-one, where in some cases a mentor teacher student might be good, but I think in probably more cases it's better to have a peer, someone that may not necessarily be the same age, but that's learning the same thing from a different background. And I think the huge advantage there is you're pushing each other, you're communicating, you're working on your personalization skills, and you're seeing those problems from a different perspective. So you're able to learn from other people's perspectives, and you can kind of give each other tasks each week to go on. And then at the beginning of the conversation, you say, "How did your homework go?" And you kind of encourage each other, just like a parent would encourage a child. You have a peer encouraging a peer pressure to kind of learn and progress, right?
Well, yeah,
So
peer pressure
if you,
usually motivates worse kinds of things.
yeah,
But especially if you're forced to be in the same building again. It's just like I'm really like ever since I've been out of high school, I'm so glad I'm out of high school. It's like really
yeah,
wasn't. But that's the thing, I wasn't even because I'm like a really tall person, and I did some bodybuilding at some time. So bullies were quite ineffective on me. So I didn't have that
mm,
sort of like a traditional intellectual high school experience of like being bullied by jocks or whatever. I was actually playing sports with the jocks, and so I didn't have like actually negative things happening to me. While especially maybe apart from some emotional drama, but I guess that would be inevitable. But even so, I was like increasingly frustrated throughout the whole high school with everything that I was forced to do that I couldn't opt out of, and everything that I did that was of any value for my future life were my extracurricular activities, which would be the kind of thing that would be the content of a system of educational system like this. Like when you say like
yeah,
discussing something with a peer, like that's just a natural way to integrate debating into the education. It's just you're setting up situations where even if you require the students to do something, you don't require absolutely specifically what they need to try to do, like what kind of project they need to try to do. You may just require them to do a project which can have some sort of broad criteria, and it would be about them being able to produce something and to defend it. And to that extent, you can have semi-formalized ways of structuring how they are doing the sessions that they have with the other students. It's
yeah,
just it should never be completely prescribing what they absolutely must do, or completely proscribing, meaning like banning something from being
mm,
done at all. If it still can be educational, of course, like you can expect them to not be like, I don't know, spout profanities at each other or something. But even in debating, you
yeah,
have some ground rules. But you can just sort of set it up as like a format that has some general boundaries. And if you want to, but I guess then one of the critiques of like sort of the open education deschooling approach is that but how do you like, how can you guarantee that they will even know what to do? Like so many people need
yeah,
direction, need to be guided.
yeah,
To that end, another idea that I've been playing with for a long time is inspired in computer games, mainly in RPGs, like role playing games, and mainly massive multiplayer online role playing games. The idea is
yeah,
okay, so if you want to have some sort of system in that education, even though it's optional and voluntary and all those things, then why not make it like the actually the highest form of cooperative computer games, which just normally their
mm,
content is fantasy or science fiction. You can make the system like that, the content of which is education, meaning that you can have like as in a role playing game, you have classes, like a class like I'm a fighter or a mage or a rogue. You can have like a
yeah,
classes as like study paths, and the study paths don't have to be because it's a sort of interactive program like thing. The branches don't have to
mm,
be like it's a direct path and you have to hit all the points until you get to the end from the beginning. It can have multiple
mm,
endpoints, multiple beginning points. It can have like branching paths through which you can go, like checking the sort of that that you have accomplished something, like
Yeah.
passing exams, uh,
You-
like
yeah.
self-paced, in like you would be going through challenges in a role-playing game. So it would be the whole map of all possible paths that still counts if you like pass the key points of them would be outlined. So it would be like you can present it like this is the whole system, but which path you specifically take through it, which should have a lot of variation, but still like within reason, meaning like you actually try to map all the possible pathways that people can take and still actually learn it, as opposed to picking one and forcing everybody through the one. Then the people could be progressing throughout that system, and it could be tracked, and they could have like there could be exams at key points and like whatever you want. It's just not like it's for the same 30 people. They have the same course about the same thing in the same order, and then they have the exam at the same time. It's like none of that is necessary or efficient.
Huh. Okay, so I definitely need to put more thought into this. So the reward system is definitely key, and I think just like I've played a couple of MMORPGs in the past. I don't know if I told you I was really big into World of Warcraft for about 14 years. Heavy hardcore, and definitely a lot of things I learned from that. It's made me who I am in many ways. So I would definitely recommend these types of games to definitely people. You obviously have to be careful not to let it take over your life and you get too addicted to certain things. But at the same time, that reward system is extremely important to motivate. Again, we talked about motivators to progress, motivators to get better at something, to think things through. The level of problems I dealt with in World of Warcraft, it was so much fun just thinking about solutions to the problems. How do we deal with this next big raid boss? How do I get 20 people working together? I felt like a maestro in some cases. I was usually the raid leader, and I felt like I was trying to direct a choir or an orchestra, and everybody had a specific role to play. You're the DPS, you're the healer, you're the tank. You have to stand exactly here and push this button at this right time, and all the different classes are working together in different ways to try to optimize everything and min-max everything. So I love that perspective of trying to solve a particular problem with certain constraints and certain rules. So if we can try to, like you said, take all of that and apply it to learning. So you need to have some kind of reward system, like you said, do some kind of test. So you have a study partner. Once a week or a couple times a week, you meet with each other, you go over specific questions or specific study material, and based on how far you get or how well you're learning it, you get points or rewards or marks, whatever it might be. Maybe even dollars to some extent. What if we, had some kind of incentive program to get more kids involved in learning, and we literally paid them if they could prove that they're learning something or do some kind of project. We pay them for the output of their project, just like I would, want to pay somebody for an essay. If they write a really good essay, they get paid based on how good that essay is, or how many people are interested in reading that essay, or
because
you have a good...
actually that's something because that's a kind of project that I actually may want to like fully build out. Like that's like one of the things that I would be very much into, like actually creating that whole tree of all the pathways and kinds of tests, and like create a really comprehensive sort of educational game. Because the thing is, it's called gamification. It's been in some limited ways attempted or used in some education programs. I think the main example is the Khan Academy, which is mainly for mathematics, also some other skills. And the main use of gamification sort of motivation so far is like that they're giving you badges and reward points. And like, sure, it's neat. It's something. It's not by far, it's not the best way how games can be rewarding, or these kinds of systems can reward people. I would like this sort of like the sort of grants, you could call it, like sort of like the money rewards for particular achievements. In that I think that would be very motivational and appropriately applied. Because like currently you have to do it through externally outside of the educational system through things like competitions. Like you get rewards for placing at competition. So that we just integrate competitions into the educational system this way, which have rewards for feats, for accomplishments. Because of course, when I say test, it could be a tournament. Like the test could be a game of competition between people. So the way that because for instance, like how do you determine that somebody is a good speaker? You can't just like give them a mark in a vacuum. They have to test their skill within like controlled situation against other speakers. So maybe it's also like, just imagine that you're at school, like a high school level, and you are choosing the tests that you will try to pass, and in what order, like as you would in a game, like you have your own progression. So it's not just like, and this day of this month everybody will do a math test. It's like, yeah, but I won't be
Yeah.
ready for that
Very
math
likely.
test at that particular day. Maybe I would just like pick, like I would want to pass that test at that time, and the test would be something more objective than a teacher
Yeah.
just asking you arbitrary questions and arbitrarily deciding a mark. It would have to be something like, okay, this is a mathematical problem to solve. If you can like solve this
Yeah.
mathematical problem, then you've proven that you've passed the test. Because like, especially in natural sciences, the problems to solve can be administered by the computer, because you can objectively determine if the person has solved the problem or not. And if it would be something, as you get more
Yeah.
advanced, of course, it could be ultimately like, what this can lead to is like when some like advanced sciences, like at like advanced levels, they could give like a test to students, and unbeknownst to the students, they give them a test of a problem that hasn't been solved yet at all. And so like you can have these things
There
like
you go.
the ultimate feats would be when the student actually solves a real problem that was
I
a
love
thing
it.
that should have been solved but hasn't been solved yet, or that
Yeah.
produces something, like for instance in like the civics class or something. It doesn't have to be like a civics textbook which like in general, in principle, describes social issues. It could be like you get points for the class by actually accomplishing something, producing something in the real world that falls within
Yep.
the sphere of civics. And that's just it, it will still involve like people, but the people won't like working in the system won't be teachers in the same sense as like authority over the students who just dictates what the students are supposed to do. There will be some
Yeah.
would be like moderators, some would be mentors, some would be people who are judges. But like if there's like a competition, so they would be like judging in the competition, because of course in arts it's not as objective as mathematics. So you would have to test people by again some kind of like you have a poetry festival or rules, or you have like a competition type, or you have again a debate competition, or you have a theatrical performance show competition, and there will be some like judges who are people who have some skill in those areas or have previously placed well in those competitions. So we have this
This
sort of
is
like
really
things.
neat.
It's just all of this should be part of the one system, and none of that should be something that a person is forced to go through.
I really like it. This is really interesting. So, say theoretically, we could kind of perfect the system, get a really good system in place that schools, countries, education systems around the world think it's great, and they've decided to convert whatever 10%, 15%, 50%, maybe even 100% of their entire education funding now goes towards funding this kind of open education. If you want, it's optional. You can opt out of the school system at whatever degree, 10%, 50%, 100%, and do this instead of, going to classes, or instead of going to school. And you're basically rewarded based on how fast you progress. You could potentially do all 13 years of school in 5 years if you really progress fast. If as long as you're following the systems and you're being graded and you're being tested as you go. And then you could theoretically, even once the system's in place, so a certain amount of funding would go towards developing content, developing the system, developing the teachers and mentors that run the system. But you could also have a certain amount of funding go towards grant money for the students, rewarding the students based on how fast they progress. So say they're able to get through 13 years of high school in 5 years. Maybe they get paid $1,000 or $2,000 every year that they complete as a grant money for their own personal education, that they can use that money to invest in MMORPGs or anything that furthers their education. They're just given that as a grant, to encourage them to go further and faster and progress. And then you could even maybe do a university that way.
Sure. I just that's the thing. You don't have to separate the education into strict like different levels of schools and stuff. This is just one system, lifelong learning journey, because as education should be, and it shouldn't be just like, oh, just 4 years at university and I'm done. I just don't have to learn anymore. That's not how that should work at all. And also, I think that there's one difference. Like you still have to have probably some basic level, like grammar school level, which is not so much about like scholastic learning, but it's mostly about just getting sort of accustomed to some sort of social norm of the society where you live. So like it's not for 100% of what's now called education, although would go way beyond education. And I think something you've mentioned, the only problem really is because you can present this globally as like a possibility that people can get involved in. The real issue that like sort of makes it not work would be with the schools, the systems, the countries wouldn't let people to do that, devote time to that
Yeah.
instead of the classical educational system. So
Right.
the sort of political
You have
aspect
to.
of it, or what you have to lobby for, or
Yeah.
somehow get to some, at least some countries to some extent allow, would be like
Well,
because that's again directly paralleling my experience from high school when what the school did for me, the best thing the school did for me was every time they let me not be in the like during the school day, they let me not be there and let me be somewhere else doing my own thing. And so I did like
yeah.
all the competitions and stuff. I get like a free day from school for them. And so
Yeah.
even if you still have there's the basic option, the basic type of educational system, then like the only thing I think you really need to accomplish is the opt-out ability, at least like percentage-wise, like some percentage of school days you could
Yeah.
skip and do something else.
Yeah, then they have that available here in Ontario. They have like a co-op program. So once you get to grade 11, you can basically take half your day and just start doing a co-op of whatever trades job or whatever job you happen to like. So you can literally get credits for doing, things you like to do. So it is getting more and more flexible that way. And I think if we even just push it down to lower and lower grades to give them more flexibility, more optionality. And the whole world is definitely more open-minded to the concept of online learning now, obviously, with being forced to be online for a year. So I think that's really opened people's minds to the potential of what works and what doesn't. So I think you could definitely start in like third world countries where they have like almost no education at all. This could be, millions of times or many times better than what they currently have if it's done well and the program's kind of out there and developed to some extent. And
Then like
you could definitely integrate it. Yeah.
the issue
Go
would
ahead.
be, of course, they still need to have computers and internet. So, but I guess that like there are some philanthropic
Yeah.
efforts in that area.
Yeah, that's not necessarily that expensive. I mean, one laptop per child was an initiative that tried to get like a little, open source iPad or a book of some kind to every child in the world. And I'm not sure how far they got with it, but they delivered several million. But yeah, it's definitely just as cheap as any other kind of education. It's cheaper than building schools. That's for sure. So just getting some kind of infrastructure in place to get them, power and technology.
Yeah, I think
It's
it's really
doable. Is what
about
I'm saying. It's
this is
doable.
like one of the first steps in like a global adaptation to a new normal. Which as the
Yeah.
like environment becomes more and more toast, it's only
Yeah.
becoming like
Yeah.
this is actually the economical, the resilient way to do it. The other
Yeah.
blocking the other obstacle that I see is parents often in especially in Western modern countries, they sort of been raised to hate children, the idea that they have to spend time with them. And so for many parents, as it turns out, because I have
Yeah.
friends who work at schools and do engage with parents a lot and have been throughout
Yeah.
this whole pandemic situation, uh, they see school as a place they can put their children so that the school is just taking care of them and they don't
Yeah.
have to.
The
So
babysitter,
that's like there's
daycare.
also a whole big element like that. There's one element that this sort of mostly online interactive educational system, which is great for learning, undoubtedly. If it would
Yeah.
involve real life people being the mentors and helping people along in it. So this doesn't solve. It's not a daycare.
Right.
So you then like, but maybe the issue, the separate issue that needs to be addressed is the issue of like because for instance, universal basic income could solve it in a way that people could just take time to focus on raising their children and wouldn't have to be like
Yeah.
forced to be really overworked while they still try to have family, which will definitely
Yeah.
decrease the frustration of parents or sort of their antipathy toward spending time with their children. So this still
Yeah.
has to be addressed somehow. Like there has to be some other separate solution that
Yeah.
will enable parents to not have to be putting or feel like they have to be putting children for the whole day to some other building for some other people to take care of them.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely potential there for still using the buildings. I mean, the buildings are mostly there, but you can just use them in different ways. Maybe you don't need as many teachers, and maybe you can just you can definitely streamline the cost a lot if you do this kind of online learning from the buildings.
Or like the teachers don't have to be physically present in the building. The
Yeah.
personnel in the building would be doing the daycare
Right.
element of it.
Yeah, and for certain ages of people, one person could probably, manage hundreds and hundreds of kids as long as they're learning and they're active. They just kind of go around and help whoever needs help with whatever.
So more
and make sure they're
like
not.
a what's called a teacher's assistant.
Yeah, it's a moderator, teacher's assistant. So yeah, you could definitely save a ton of money by not having as many teachers and having more self-directed classes. Even if it was just like half of it, half the classes you do self-directed, half the classes you have a teacher or something to generally move in that direction.
I would just be careful to say like we wouldn't need that many teachers because like there'll still be the people would still have every opportunity to be involved in the system in a position that's equivalent to a teacher. It's just you wouldn't need to have them in the building. Is I think that because the other issue like there are sides to the problem, which each of the sides is sort of trying to conserve the current situation because they are afraid of things being different. And the last remaining one of the remaining components is the teachers need jobs. So again, like if you had like universal basic income, then nobody would need to be a teacher as a job and could be like doing it to the extent to which they want. But also,
and perhaps,
I just wanted to finish the thought. But also, in this system, if you're like you're used to paying for a certain amount of teachers, you don't have to suddenly in this new system pay for more teachers or employ less teachers. Like you can still be employing like instructional, like you don't have to call them teachers, but like you have to still can be employing the same amount of people which have some functions within the system because that system by its very nature is like infinitely expansive. Like the amount of people that you have involved in it just determines like how much it can, like how good it can be, because that's the kind of thing that like you could like sort of again the technology itself can like have like a lot of information available to a lot of people all the time. Automated like AI and computer-based game systems could be interacting with the students. So even like many more students than just any number of live teachers that you can have. But if you also have some number of live teachers, then they can be involved in the system. Like in an MMO, it would be like if NPCs were played by people.
Yeah, this is amazing. This is a whole nother section in Pillar 3, for finding purpose and education. I'm going to write up a whole, I think, section on this, and we'll keep developing. Pillar 3 is definitely going to be the biggest pillar in the book at this rate. If we keep on adding to it with, all the different ideas, TruthWorks project. We got to come up with a name for this, though, because I'm pretty excited about this. We'll have to think of a really good name for the new worldwide education initiative. Open ed or whatever it might call. There's probably a ton out there that are doing similar things. So I'm going to do some research on that this week. And that's my homework for this week. I'm pretty excited about that.
Open education is the general name of the general initiative. It just hasn't been very widespread, organized, or successful yet globally. There's just some specific examples of smaller implementations of it.
Yeah, I think our goal should be something like having a good homeschool system that any parent anywhere in the world can pull their kid out of the current education system, opt out of it, and do this, and their kid will be able to progress faster, better, stronger, and have a much better life, enjoyable life than in the current education system. Something like that to start with. But then as it evolved, the mainstream system might even start to adopt it little by little too. If you can kind of prove that it works better than their stuff, they might be willing to invest more in it. And it just kind of takes off from there as an idea.
Definitely be a gradually transitional interplay between the classical educational systems and this new alternative. It doesn't have to be complete immediately, and it's not going to take over the classical educational systems to any larger degree than the societies in those countries will want to.
But I can definitely say it's something my son would love to do if we can do it well. He's been kind of wanting to leave the general education system for a while, but I wasn't really comfortable with the homeschooling, with me and my wife teaching him. But if we can have some kind of good program in place that he can teach himself or collaborate with a peer of his somewhere else in the world and they teach each other as study partners, I'd be much more willing to consider something like that if it was kind of established.
Because especially considering there would still be professional lecturers involved in that system for any aspect of it that requires somebody actually doing a lecture. Because that's another thing, like one of the flaws of the classical educational systems is that they make everything a lecture. Like it doesn't have to be like you don't have to just like theoretically be lectured about every single subject all the time. That's not very effective. Like 10 to 20% of the whole system should be lecturing. Is what like the science indicates is like the right amount. Other things could be interactive, like dealing with interactive programs that are tests or games, which are supposed to teach you something, or Then you can have just like repositories of information. You can have videos like the TED Talks and stuff. That's another
Yeah.
like 10 to 20% of like the content or what person engages with and through that learns. Then there should be actually the like 40-50% of the whole thing should be direct live interaction, like debates and direct working on projects with people who are your peers. Which, but again, peers
I like it.
doesn't have to mean the same age. Peers just people of the same interest who are part of the same system of different ages and backgrounds. And another thing is like just consider like things like World of Warcraft. Even though technically it's just playing at something, it's not even like the content of it is not a real thing. Like there's some argument to be made, like there's some sort of like a real story in it, or we could have some real like how to say that existential value in it. There is some. But what I mean to say
Yeah.
is that how successful it is at capturing the attention of people and motivating them to spend a lot of time in that world. What if you just made the real world this like same structure that's engaging?
Yeah, just as much fun, right? The gamification, I think, is a key word. So I'm gonna really think this hard this week and do some research on how to gamify education from beginning to end, and really get that fun concept into all of it, and give them that sense of progression. It's the whole casino mentality where you get that boost of what do you call it, endorphins or whatever it is into your brain from progressing. So you need that kind of gamification and education that just makes you feel good about progressing.
Yeah, it's just you have to be careful to do it ethically, because there's the whole thing about like, it's called Skinner
Yeah.
box. That's specific from social science, from behaviorism, is a specific way to construct these experiences exactly to maximize their addictiveness and to make people unable to leave them and stop them doing. And it is effective incredibly, because people, what they do is like they even would do something that's called grinding, that like playing the game even
Yep.
though it's not fun anymore. So
Yep.
it's like if you can argue like, but you can't make education fun. Well, even activities that are complete grind, like people feel education is today, people would still devote infinite amounts of time to it, depending on how is the way to interact with it is structured. So there's a whole
Yeah.
science to it, which is you have to be careful to be ethical about it. But you can definitely
Yeah.
make even subjects that are not in and of themselves inherently funny or fun. You can make the just by how you structure people engaging with that experience, you can make them engaging. You can make them, I wouldn't say addictive, like that would be going a step too far, but make them something that people will be completely able and willing to do.